Hello, my name is Ben Miller, and I'm here with my dad, Dr. Ken Miller, to talk about his new book, Ironworker Gold. Dad, will you tell us about yourself?
Well, I've had over 50 years experience in doing psychotherapy. I started at the State Mental Hospital 53 years ago as an activities therapist, then a case manager, then a teacher, then a supervisor. And after 11, well, actually, I was there 11 years, 11 months. The last 5, I was the clinical director of a 50 um, person department doing activities therapy from A to Z for our chronically our mentally ill patients in Northwest Ohio.
All right, well, now that they know a little bit about you, let's dive right into your new book, Ironworker Gold. So the book starts with a moment when you were 5 or 6 years old and you walked up to your father, my Papa Miller, my grandfather, and you told him you didn't like that death thing. What did he say?
Yeah, I mean, I thought we lived forever, and I saw something on TV where a little boy died, and went, "Whoa, that could happen to me." And so I went to my dad. I said, "Dad, I'm not feeling too good. I mean, am I gonna die? I mean, what do you think of that death thing?" I mean, he didn't sugarcoat it or have angels and whatnot fly in. He just said, "Yeah." I said, "So what do you think of the death thing?" He said, "Yeah, we don't like it, but we all got to do it." I mean, drop the microphone, and that was that. I realized that's just part of the deal, being human.
He didn't sugarcoat it, but somehow it helped. Why do you think that simple response did more for you than a long explanation ever could have?
Well, as a child, I mean, simple and easy and direct is the best way to go. A long-winded philosophical discussion, or pouring in a bunch of metaphors and floaty ideas about angels and whatnot, that wouldn't fly too well. I mean, he was a very practical man and a hardworking man, but a humorous man. And he, as they say, said it like it was.
And speaking of him, we were talking about Papa Ferdinand Miller, Ferd Miller.
Yeah.
So, Papa Miller, your father also went to World War II at age 18, saw combat in Sicily, the Philippines, and he stood on the very beach where General MacArthur made his famous return. When you asked him about that moment later in life, what did he say?
Well, I just want to say he was in Sicily, those landings in Salerno and Sicily, and he transported German and Italian prisoners back and forth. They completed that mission. After they got all those prisoners over to North Africa, and they reassigned them to the Philippines. So he was at those landings on those beaches. He was on an LCI, a landing craft and infantry, the smallest ocean-going ship. Anyway, they had a big bloodbath there, taking the beach and whatnot. And when I asked him about General MacArthur, what do you think of the general? He said, "I shall return," and that was like a famous thing. And they actually had movies. I think they shot it 4 times. He said, where the general was coming ashore. But I said, "So what'd you think of the general?" And he just went like that. I said, "Well, what's wrong with the general, Dad?" He said that son of a bitch complained that he got his feet wet. And he said, "What about the young men that lost their arms, their legs, their lives?" And there was blood as far as you could see along that beach. So it didn't wear very well in his reality that he got his feet wet.
So, what does that tell us about how he saw the world, and why does that matter for the rest of the book?
Well, you can complain about every little inconvenience, from getting your feet wet to getting cut off in traffic, or someone says something to you in a certain tone and you go sideways about it. And so I think he had a sense of proportion. And it's important to keep some balance, not only in your perceptions, but when you're up there 50 feet high on an iron beam. Yeah.
So, fast forward, speaking of iron beams, fast forward to when your father was around 50, working steel about 20 feet up. He loses his balance, falls headfirst, lands on concrete, shatters his teeth, splits his skull open, and 3 days later he walks out of the hospital. What did he say when people asked how he survived?
Well, let's talk about the fall. He hit a sharp piece of concrete, split his skull, and he had false teeth, so it crushed his teeth. They rushed him to the hospital, and when we got there, he was in traction. And it didn't look good. In fact, when I had called in the hospital, I said, "Hey, did my dad, you get an iron worker there?" I said, "Oh, yeah." I said, "He had a bad fall." And they said, "Do you have him there?" He said, the man didn't cover up the receiver of the phone. He looked over there and says, "Is that guy still alive over there?" I went, "Whoa, my God." My heart fell into my feet. He said, "Oh, man, that looks bad." I said, "Oh, my." So we rushed up to the hospital. My brothers, my sister, I think, took my mother. And when we got there, he was already in traction and all bound up. And his teeth were smashed out. And 3 days later, he walked out of that hospital. And then people would ask, weeks or a month or two later, "Hey, Ferdy, how'd you survive that fall?" And his humor was, "A good thing I fell on my ass, because if I had fallen on my head, I would have died." That was his humor. Yeah.
Yep. So that line, "Good thing I fell on my ass, because if I had fallen on my head, I would have died." He's kind of called himself a butthead, it seems. But here's the question: what is that doing psychologically? Because it's funny, but what you're saying is it's also something much more than funny. What is that doing psychologically? That sense
Oh,
of
well,
humor?
that's, we take classes in neurolinguistics programming and creative ways to do therapy called reframing. Talk about a spontaneous reframe. He didn't become a victim of the story or the fall. A lot of people I've worked with in chronic pain, and we know this is a condition that more and more Americans are having, but a lot of people have a fall or an accident, a car wreck, an injury in the factory, and so forth, and they milk their physical condition for what we call in chronic pain management secondary gain. So they get pity out of telling their story, rehearsing their story, and for some people, it's a way for them to make more money in a legal settlement, quite frankly. So he didn't do any of that. He just carried on with living his life, and he worked a total of 60 years in ironwork, because even after he retired, he still went back and did, part-time work and so on in ironwork.
So you grew up with this man, a World War II veteran who survived a 20-foot fall into concrete and responded to both with a one-liner. How did that shape the psychotherapist you became over the next 50 years?
Well, psychotherapy can be very complex and convoluted because many patients or clients come in with complex, convoluted clinical situations that do require some sophistication. And that's why we spend, so many years, 6 years to get a master's, 8 or 9 to get a doctorate, so that you can deal with the complexities that will show up. And it's not like you've had training for every instance that shows up. So I've lost track of what you asked me, but go ahead.
We'll go ahead then. So let's tell people what the book is actually about. And you can find it on Amazon, Ironworker Gold by Dr. Ken Miller. It's for sale on Amazon right now.
On sale.
On sale.
$11.99.
So let's talk about what the book is actually about. The title is Ironworker Gold. Before someone even opens the book, how would you explain what Ironworker Gold means? What's the alchemy you're describing?
Well, in this life, it's a lot of falls, a lot of twists, a lot of turns. We come into this world and we're hungry and thirsty. And of course, a good mom and dad will take care of you and provide those things. But we're still hungry and thirsty for love, for what we call strokes or units of feeling. And along the way, mom and dad are not there to save us all the time. So we get bruised knees and broken bones and upsetting events. And so these annoying, painful events happen, and that's the iron. We have, life is like a grindstone. Whether it grinds us or polishes us depends on what we're made out of. And so there's a number of grinding experiences as we grow through life. And so we have to learn to get a new reframe, a new reset. We have to be able to turn our iron into gold. We have to be able to polish that iron and go through not a situation, but a process of transformation. If we're really going to grow psychologically, we can't let every sling and arrow diminish us, but rather we have to learn how to cope with those and transform those experiences into golden experiences.
Very good. You write that most suffering doesn't come from what actually happens to us. It comes from the story our mind writes afterward. Can you break that down? Because I think most people believe they're just reacting to reality.
Oh, for sure. And like I was just saying, none of us are exempt from what's going to happen to us in life. A slip and fall, you don't make the baseball team or the cheerleader squad. There's all kinds of disappointments along the way. I mean, being human is a very, very messy experience. And there's no dress rehearsals. This is all the way live. And so I lost my train of thought again. We'll have to blot that
We'll just
out.
keep it rolling forward then. So, you introduced something called the poor me script. What is it, and why does the brain default to it even when we don't want it to?
Well, that goes back to stories. People want sympathy, they want positive strokes when they're feeling down and out. And so the poor me script gets a lot of mileage. People, again, get some secondary gain out of suffering. They might get more attention, they may get compensation, they may get people just joining them in their suffering, and they somehow think that they're going to get some kind of comfort from that, but really it just perpetuates the suffering. So what I use in therapy a lot is what I call, there was a reality therapy with, then it got choice theory to prop it up, but what I do is something called choice therapy. And so I have my patients or clients put I choose in front of everything they're going through, and this starts to restore power and agency. I choose to have a headache. I choose to take a walk around the block. I choose to watch my weight. So everything becomes a choice. And what happens, it rings a bell inside their head that, hey, I'm not going to choose a headache. I'm not going to choose to suffer. I'm going to make better choices. And so that's one thing we really enforce, whether they're good, bad, or ugly, the choices are your choices, and you're responsible or able to respond to the events that are happening in the world.
Speaking of scripts, I'm going to go off script here for a second. I remember a story where Papa Miller made a very stoic choice when your mom died, when his wife died. And one of you asked him, said, aren't you going to cry, or are you going to cry about it? And he said, I'm not gonna.
Oh yeah, he said gonna. He said that chapter is over. I ain't gonna cry about it. What's it gonna do? I don't like it, and it's really odd living without her, but I ain't gonna do it.
So
It was a choice. I
chose
choose
not
not
to
to.
cry.
Well, he chose not to. I mean, he had some watery eyes,
Yeah.
but he didn't, fall apart and say it's not fair and I can't stand it, and woe is me. He went on living, being supported by his large family, which he said family's everything. If you have family, you have everything. No family, you don't have much. You have nothing.
And the context is there is a long, good as can be marriage, and he loved her,
Yes,
but
yes.
still he chose, I'm not gonna cry. That always stuck with me. I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
You spent decades as a psychotherapist, and in the book you describe moving away from classical disputation of irrational beliefs towards something you call irrational belief release, the IBR. So what's the difference, and what's the single pivot question that changes everything?
Oh, yeah, I've done 40, 50 years of rational emotive behavioral therapy, and it's a work of genius by Dr. Albert Ellis, probably one of the top 3 psychologists of the last century. And that's in the 40s and 50s, we were doing a lot of psychoanalysis. Well, we got up off the couch and Ellis said, why don't we talk to each other and use our temporal lobes and our reason and work our way through the activating events that upset us. And so Ellis, with his rational emotive approach, worked out that there's an activating event, a belief about that event creates the 3 big upsets, which are anger, anxiety, and depression. And then you go to D, which is you detect the irrational beliefs, and then you dispute them. You detect, you debate, you dispute. And a lot of your therapy would be getting into disputing, why is it awful? How long will it be terrible? Who says it's horrible? Why shouldn't this be happening? And you can go on and on forever, I found. So I like to streamline things. I came up with what I call the sledgehammer, or the pivot question, which is, I ask the patient or client when they come in with their story of victimhood or poor me, who would you be without that absolutistic perfectionistic, irrational belief. And it just shatters the whole, kind of cognitive castles that they have constructed about woe is me, or it's not fair, or I can't stand it. So then we start to fillet that out. There's a presupposition in that pivot question that we suffer from absolutism and perfectionism, and what I call 100%ism. And people think they should, they must, they ought be perfect. And if they shouldn't be perfect, they think you should be perfect. And like I say, what did we do to the guy that said he was perfect on this planet? We crucified him. So perfection is actually very overrated. So we have to be very gentle with ourselves. We have to not only practice mindfulness, but kindfulness, first towards ourselves and then others.
All right. So cloud therapy is one of your signature tools. For someone who's never heard that term, clouds, weather, sky, walk us through it like you're explaining it to a patient for the first time, your cloud therapy.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a Gestalt therapy move I created. And when people come in, they're usually suffering one of the big three, which is anger, anxiety, or depression. And now there's hundreds of tentacles off of that emotional distress, but it's anger, anxiety, and depression. So say someone comes in very depressed. And I said, so what if that depression were a cloud? What color would it be? What size would it be? What would it be doing? And very often they'll say it's dark gray, it's very heavy, and it's just solid, it's not moving. And so what's the weather associated with that? Well, I can't move. I'm kind of frozen. I don't want to get up in the morning. I don't want to go to work. I don't want to smile at my loved ones. And they're just kind of in a glue, kind of a gooey situation. And then I propel them into, well, what's beyond the gray clouds, the dark clouds? Maybe even have some rain in there. What's beyond this emotional paralysis? There's something called the sky. And ultimately, clouds will come and go. This too shall pass. It's like that famous story with the king who was bipolar. And he told his wise men, he got him, hey, I'm tired of this up and down. Too much depression, too much mania. You have till tomorrow to solve my bipolar problem. And they're all shaking. The next day they came in with a purple pillow with a gold ring on it. And he said, how's this gold ring going to help me? And they said, well, sire, your highness, look at the ring. And inside the ring it said, and this too shall pass. And that's one of the great things about impermanence. We very often fear impermanence, but we're not nouns, we're verbs. Likewise, our feelings, our thoughts, our emotional weather, we don't have to be stuck there. And don't get me wrong, chronic depression of 3 months, 6 months, some people come in with years of depression where they're frozen by fear or they're just stuck in the mud. Like I tell them, what's the difference between a rut and a grave? Only the dimensions. So anyway, the cloud, I can have somebody come in that's very angry. They're in fights with their kids or their wife all the time. So they have red, angry clouds. And by turning it into a cloud, it lets them know that that's something they have or they're creating. It's not something they ultimately are. Ultimately, they're the sky, but they're having this then emotional weather of hot anger, rage, yelling, screaming, stuff like that. And we can clear that stuff out more quickly by saying, become the sky. Remember who you really are. You're the sky. You're not the clouds. You're not the weather. You're the sky having those emotional experiences.
Yes, this is all very helpful to the viewers. I'm sure many of you are hearing it for the first time, although I've heard, he's raised me this way. So, but let's keep talking about what's in it for the reader, what's in it for the viewer. So if they read your book, let's talk about some of the benefits. So chapter 11 is called Becoming Mostly Unoffendable. I love that mostly. It's so honest. What does being mostly unoffendable actually look like in a real day? And what does it do for your relationships?
Well, you let go of perfectionism. And we think life should or must or ought be a particular way. And if people offend our sense of rightness, we're offended. And we can, instead of respond, we can lash back or react. So using cloud therapy, realizing emotions and thoughts and feelings come and go. I have them, but I am not them any more than I am my shoes or my glasses. This helps a person step away and soften, not be rigid, not be hard. Let their shoulders soften, let the breathing move through so that they're relaxing and not so reactive. It's just a way of softening, being more accepting. Like I say, the secret of living at the age of 50, I found out the secret of living is in the giving, and I get great joy in giving. There's just a joy in that. But as I aged out even more, I realized the secret of life is in the forgiving, not just giving, but beyond that is forgiving. And mostly we're forgiving ourselves. And that's where the mindfulness comes in, where we extend the metta, the kindness, the loving kindness towards ourselves, or the not just mindfulness, but kindfulness. May I have good physical health. May I have good mental health. May I follow my bliss. May I leave a trail of happiness. And then after I extend that, after I experience it, I now have the power to extend that to people who may be rubbing me the wrong way. And so mostly we can be unoffendable because we're not being rigid about protecting some imaginary ego.
So you also introduce dice therapy, and you might think it involves a trip to the casino or something, but it doesn't. What problem is dice therapy solving, and how does rolling dice actually help someone who's frozen or stuck?
Well, many examples, just a few. Sometimes people are in power struggles with their children. And so we can have, and a nice move is have the child or even the teenager roll the dice. Odd, a 1, a 3, or a 5 means no to the question they're asking. Are they going to clean their room? Are they going to do the dishes? Are they going to sweep the carpet? If they roll an even, a 2, 4, or a 6, then yes, it's time to just do the task. This takes all the push and pull out of it, and we use randomness as an ally to break up kind of a power struggle. And then sometimes you can assign tasks to the actual number, on the dice. 1 could be make your bed, 2 could be brush your teeth, 3 could be do the dishes, 4 do the laundry. And we put some fun things in there too. 5 take a walk, or 6 take a stretch or play on your game for 10 minutes. And then we let the kid or the teen roll the dice, and then they get right about doing that task.
All right, so the book is built around your father's 3 Zen bombs, 3 one-liners that he handed you over a lifetime. If someone watching this has been carrying a heavy story about their life, a loss, a failure, a diagnosis, what do these 3 lessons offer them that therapy or self-help books usually miss?
Well, I'm trying to recall what they were, but the one is, I said, Dad, at the age of almost 88, I said, so what after all this stress and strain and the war and raising a family and being an ironworker, I mean, what's the bottom line? He said, Ken, you can lose anything you want in this life. Just don't lose your sense of humor. And that has stuck with me through the years, that because I've seen some very dire, difficult situations, medical diagnoses that can upend a person's psychology, their happiness, and so on. And then I'm trying to think of one of them. I didn't know this till he had passed away, and my brothers were actually laughing and joking at the funeral. I said, what are you guys laughing about? They said, oh, Dad. I said, well, do you remember what he said? He was an iron worker, and he worked for Henry Gertzweiler steel erectors here, well known in Toledo in Northwest Ohio. And Dad would get up every morning and declare, every day is an erection. So... what's our third one? I'm blocking on the third.
They can read the book to find the third one.
Yeah, but he had a great sense of humor, and he had a great smile too. Yeah.
And I remember sometimes he'd pop out his fake teeth to spook us.
With the little kids, he'll pop his teeth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you dedicated this book to your parents, to Mom, and to your sons, me and my brothers. What were you hoping we'd take away from it? What do you want us to carry from this?
That life can be hard and tough and inconvenient, and it can feel like you're carrying a lot of heavy iron. But if you commit to hard work, helping others, and being honest, and then the 4th H is humor, if you can use those skills and those points of view, you can turn your iron into gold. And actually, we're all out to transform ultimately, notwithstanding so many people get stuck at a certain age or stage of their life and they give up and they're just stuck at a certain age or stage of their life. But I think that the true joy in life is to give and to forgive and to keep on moving. And that's what the dice therapy helps you do too. You get moving when you start rolling those dice, a yes or no. Do I take a walk? Do I clean my room out? I roll a yes, and I'm going to clean my room out or arrange something better. I'm going to go visit a friend instead of just sit home watch TV. So it's all about reality therapy. It's really about doing. We know in reality therapy, if you start doing things, you start to change your feelings. Very often people sit around and try to change their feelings. That doesn't do it as fast as get up and do something behavioral. And the dice therapy helps you do that. Cloud therapy helps you do that. And the IBR helps you break through that analysis paralysis.
So you've been a psychotherapist for over 50 years. What is the single most common mistake you've watched people make when they're suffering? And what does this book teach them to do instead?
Well, they get addicted to their story. In fact, some patients are addicted to suffering because they're getting secondary gain. And in some instances, they're fighting to be sick. Even though we have plenty of tools and techniques and strategies that will really reframe, refocus, and get a person back on track, sometimes they're almost afraid to get better because they're addicted to suffering, because they are getting secondary gain from that. I'm not saying all, but there's a certain proportion of people that, they may be in red alert or orange alert, but they have to have enough motivation to get out of the red and orange alert to get into yellow alert, and then ultimately turn into green alert where they walk away discharged and freely functioning.
And so, in short, what does the book teach them to do instead of being addicted to that suffering?
When you change your mind, you change your life. And that's the real freedom in life, is to realize there's hundreds of techniques, hundreds of books, plenty of therapists in the world that can help you change your mind and change your life. And the Ironworker Gold is just one of those kind of books. It flows very freely. It's not written in certain type paragraphs. It's not rigid. It's almost like a free-flowing poem. And I put some haiku poems in there too. It's kind of like diamond splitters or ways to crystallize the concept I've talked about in that particular chapter.
So, in closing here, the last few questions, who is this book for? If someone's watching this right now, trying to decide if it's worth their time or money to buy it, what kind of person walks away genuinely changed by it?
Well, those suffering anger, anxiety, and depression. And this book it's easily read, so anyone from age 12 on can read this book.
You can see it's not
Yeah.
too...
And you can flick through there and just show. And by the way, I have paintings in there, chapter, dividers, and there's some haiku poetry in there. There's one of the paintings. Now the paintings are in black and white. To publish this book in color would have been $25. Who's going to buy that? But this is $11.99. The cover is beautifully done. And I want to thank Ben for actually stitching the book together and getting it uploaded. We have a few more coming out in the near future. But I'm getting a lot of positive responses from people saying, God, this really helped me. I mean, actually reading the book is like going through a couple sessions of therapy, maybe upwards to 3. And you can read it in an hour. But it's so reinforcing, it's so creative that it can open a person's mind. That old saying, your mind is like a parachute. It functions best when it's open. Otherwise, you crash. So this gets people out of ruts. It's a rut buster, and it gets the iron moving into gold.
And the book includes what you call a daily Ironworker Gold practice, a golden practice. Can you give viewers a taste of what that looks like and what they can expect if they actually do it?
Well, I don't want to say too much. We got 3 bonuses in there.
Yeah.
Part of it is cloud therapy. Part of it's reframing. and part of it's laughter. So they'll have to read the book for that bonus. There's 4 bonuses in that book.
So if you want to read the book, it's on Amazon. Ironworker Gold, Facing Life with Humor When Reality Bites by Dr. Ken Miller. Try and link it below in the description. And is there anything else, or what else do you want viewers to know before they go get it?
Nothing else. I mean, very often, and I learned this in graduate school and beyond, we always tell the patient or the client, therapy is hard work. Because very often they think, well, this complex, convoluted situation should be cleared up very quickly. And with the new approaches, with solution-focused therapy, narrative therapy, cloud therapy, DICE therapy, and IBR, you can speed it along. But it really comes down to that old saying, I hate to say the cliche, how many psychotherapists does it take to change the light bulb? It only takes one, but the light bulb's got to want to change.
All right, thank you for viewing. Make sure you go get your copy of Ironworker Gold by Dr. Ken Miller on Amazon.com. And stay tuned for future interviews. Thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and we hope you enjoy the book.